Welcome to Psych Muse, the place where psychology and philosophy converge to reveal the hidden patterns of human existence. Today's journey takes us into the mind of Carl Gustav Jung, the visionary psychologist who dared to explore the depths of the unconscious and confront truths most of us would rather ignore. Our topic is the danger of seeing what others don't. Carl Jung. On the surface, the phrase might sound poetic, perhaps even inspiring. But Jung knew that to see what others don't is not merely a gift. It is often a perilous burden. Those who see differently, whether in history, science, philosophy, or their own personal lives, are often misunderstood, isolated, or even attacked. And yet this act of seeing, of perceiving what is hidden, may also be the very path to transformation and individuation. In this video, we will explore Jung's insights in 7 parts, tracing how the danger of seeing what others don't reveals itself in the loneliness of visionaries, the burden of misunderstanding, the awakening of the collective shadow, the temptation of arrogance, the call toward individuation, the need for symbols and myths, and finally, the ultimate reconciliation with the unseen forces of life. Let us begin our exploration with the first 2 steps on this journey. Part 1. The gift and burden of vision. Carl Jung understood something that few psychologists of his era dared to acknowledge: that human beings are not simply rational creatures making choices based on logic. Beneath the surface of everyday consciousness lies an immense ocean of dreams, instincts and archetypes, patterns of behavior and meaning that stretch back to the dawn of humanity. Jung was not content to skim the surface. He plunged into this ocean, recording his visions, analyzing symbols and exploring myths. But he also knew that those who see differently often stand apart from the rest of society. To see what others don't is both a gift and a burden. The visionary may see connections others miss, notice symbols that reveal deep truths, or sense dangers invisible to the collective. But these very abilities mark them as outsiders. History provides countless examples of this paradox. The prophets of old, who spoke truths that unsettled their people, were dismissed as madmen. Socrates, whose relentless questioning threatened the illusions of Athens, was condemned to death. Giordano Bruno, who envisioned a universe without boundaries, was burned at the stake. Visionaries often carry insights that the world is not ready to receive. Jung himself experienced this tension. His break with Sigmund Freud was not merely a professional disagreement. It was the result of Jung daring to see dimensions of the psyche, spiritual, mythological, symbolic, that Freud dismissed. By choosing to follow his own vision, Jung stepped outside the safety of the mainstream. For him, seeing differently meant isolation, even ridicule. And this is the first danger, the loneliness of the visionary. To see what others don't often means being unable to share the very truths that define one's existence. Jung once wrote that loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate what matters most. Imagine carrying a treasure of insight, only to find that others see it as meaningless or worse, threatening. That treasure becomes a burden heavy with silence. Yet Jung also believed this burden was necessary. It is often the lonely visionary who prepares the way for future generations. The seeds of insight may not blossom immediately, but they lie dormant until the world is ready to receive them. To see what others don't, therefore, is to live in the tension between rejection and prophecy, between isolation and the possibility of transformation. Part 2. The shadow of misunderstanding. If loneliness is the first danger of vision, then misunderstanding is the second. To see what others don't is not only to stand apart, but also to become a mirror for society's fears and projections. Jung's concept of the shadow is vital here. The shadow represents all that we repress or deny, the impulses, weaknesses, and fears we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves. But when someone else reveals those truths, the shadow lashes out. The visionary who exposes uncomfortable realities often becomes the target of projection. They are accused of being arrogant, dangerous, or delusional, not because they are, but because they reveal what others cannot face. Consider Galileo. His discovery of celestial truth did not simply expand human knowledge. It threatened the worldview of his time. His contemporaries were not ready to accept that Earth was not the center of the universe, and so he was misunderstood, silenced, and forced to recant. Similarly, Jung's exploration of dreams and archetypes was dismissed by some as mystical nonsense, even though today his insights form a cornerstone of depth psychology. Misunderstanding, however, is not limited to great figures of history. In everyday life, those who see differently often face the same struggle. A person who notices toxic patterns in a family may be told they are exaggerating. An individual who questions corruption in an organization may be accused of being disloyal. A thinker who challenges cultural illusions may be labeled a cynic or troublemaker. Jung would say that this is inevitable. When you see what others don't, you are not only confronting your own shadows but stirring the shadows of those around you. And when the shadow is awakened, it rarely responds with gratitude. It responds with hostility. This danger of misunderstanding can be deeply painful. It may lead to broken relationships, social exile, or even persecution. But Jung insisted that it is also a crucial step in the journey of individuation, the process of becoming one's true self. To endure misunderstanding without abandoning one's vision requires courage. It requires a willingness to stand firm in the truth even when that truth is rejected. Thus, the second danger of seeing what others don't is being cast into the role of the outcast, the misunderstood, the scapegoat. Yet, paradoxically, it is often through this very role that the visionary fulfills their deepest calling. Part 3. The awakening of the collective shadow. If loneliness and misunderstanding are the first dangers of seeing what others don't, the third is even more profound. The awakening of the collective shadow. Carl Jung believed that just as individuals have shadows, hidden fears, repressed desires, unacknowledged truths, so too do societies. A culture, a nation, even an entire era carries its collective shadow. These are the uncomfortable realities it refuses to face. Its violence, its injustices, its hypocrisies. And when someone dares to see these truths, they disturb not only individuals but the very foundations of the collective psyche. To reveal a personal shadow might cause conflict within a family or friendship. But to reveal the collective shadow is to challenge the myths that hold a community together. It is to pull back the curtain on illusions that provide comfort, order, and identity. And this is dangerous, for societies rarely tolerate those who disrupt their self-image. Think of the great reformers and truth-tellers in history. Martin Luther King Jr. dared to reveal the shadow of racial injustice in America. Nelson Mandela confronted the shadow of apartheid in South Africa. Their visions were not welcomed at first. They were met with resistance, hostility, even imprisonment. Why? Because they forced the collective to face what it would rather deny. Jung himself lived through the horrors of 2 world wars, and he saw firsthand how the collective shadow can erupt with terrifying force. He warned that when societies refuse to acknowledge their darkness, it spills out unconsciously, taking the form of violence, oppression, and war. To see this truth is to bear an almost unbearable weight. For once you perceive the collective shadow, you cannot unsee it. You feel compelled to name it, to reveal it. And yet in doing so, you may become a target of its wrath. This is the third danger of seeing what others don't. Awakening the collective shadow and, in turn, carrying the risk of being crushed beneath it. The visionary becomes both a seer and a scapegoat. They carry the torch of truth, but the very light they hold blinds those who would rather remain in darkness. Part 4. The temptation of arrogance. There is yet another danger, subtler and more insidious than misunderstanding or rejection. Jung warned that those who see differently must guard against the temptation of arrogance. To see what others don't can create a feeling of superiority. One begins to think, I alone see the truth. I alone understand reality. This is a seductive but dangerous trap, for the visionary is still human, still fallible, still shadowed by unconscious forces. The danger of arrogance is that it blinds the seer, turning insight into pride, vision into dogma, and wisdom into tyranny. Jung emphasized humility as the safeguard against this temptation. He often said that the unconscious is greater than any one individual. Even the most gifted visionary sees only fragments of the whole. No human being can claim complete knowledge of the psyche, the cosmos, or the divine. To forget this is to fall into inflation, the swelling of the ego until it mistakes itself for the truth. History is filled with tragic examples of visionaries who succumbed to arrogance. Leaders who began with genuine insight turned into dictators when they believed themselves infallible. Thinkers who uncovered profound truths became rigid and dogmatic, rejecting any perspective but their own. Even spiritual teachers, when overwhelmed by their followers' devotion, have mistaken themselves for gods. Jung himself wrestled with this danger. In his Red Book, where he recorded his visions and dialogues with inner figures, he confessed the fear of being consumed by his own insights. He knew that to walk close to the unconscious is to walk a fine line between revelation and madness. The visionary must remain grounded, humble, and open to correction, lest their gift turn destructive. This is the fourth danger of seeing what others don't. The temptation to inflate the ego, to believe that one's vision grants superiority. True wisdom requires humility, the recognition that what we see is but a glimpse, not the whole. Part 5. The path of individuation. Amid these dangers, Jung pointed to a greater purpose, the path of individuation. This is the process of becoming one's true self, of integrating the conscious and unconscious, the light and shadow, the personal and collective. To see what others don't is not merely a burden, it is also a calling. The very dangers of isolation, misunderstanding, and arrogance are challenges that shape the soul. They force the visionary to confront themselves, to grow beyond the need for external validation, and to align with a deeper inner truth. Jung described individuation as a journey toward wholeness. It is not about becoming perfect, but about embracing the full spectrum of who we are, our strengths and weaknesses, our light and darkness, our reason and our mystery. To see what others don't often means to face truths about ourselves that we would rather ignore. It is to wrestle with our own shadow, even as we glimpse the shadows of others. But in this struggle lies transformation. The one who dares to walk this path becomes more than an observer of hidden truths. They become a participant in them. They embody a new way of being, a new consciousness that radiates outward. The path of individuation is not for the faint of heart. It requires courage, patience, and resilience. It may demand sacrifice, for the visionary must often walk alone, misunderstood, or even opposed. But Jung believed that this path is the destiny of the human soul. To refuse it is to live half asleep. To embrace it is to awaken. Thus, the fifth danger of seeing what others don't is also its promise, that the very struggles which isolate and challenge us may also be the crucible in which the true self is forged. Part 6. The need for symbols and myths. Carl Jung often reminded us that human beings cannot live by reason alone. Rational thought gives us tools, but it does not give us meaning. What truly guides our lives are the symbols, myths, and archetypes that spring from the unconscious. They are the invisible framework shaping how we see ourselves, others, and the world. Those who see what others don't are often sensitive to these deeper layers. They notice how a story repeats itself across cultures, how a dream reflects a forgotten myth, how an image holds the power to transform a person's life. Jung called these recurring images archetypes, primordial patterns that live in every psyche. But here lies another danger. To perceive archetypes and symbols is to glimpse truths that others may dismiss as superstition or fantasy. In the modern age, where science and technology dominate, the language of myth is often devalued. The one who speaks in symbols may be treated as irrational, even delusional. And yet Jung insisted that without myth, the soul withers. A purely rational life becomes hollow, stripped of depth and purpose. Jung saw this danger in his own patients. Many who came to him were not suffering from clinical illness in the narrow sense, but from a loss of meaning. They lived successful lives outwardly, yet inwardly they felt empty, disconnected, restless. For Jung, this was not a medical problem but a spiritual one, the absence of myth. Thus, the sixth danger of seeing what others don't is the burden of carrying symbols in a world that resists them. The visionary may see archetypes moving beneath the surface of politics, culture, or personal life, but when they speak of them, they may be ignored or mocked. Yet Jung would say that to abandon myth is to abandon the very roots of our humanity. To truly live, we must learn to honor symbols, to listen to dreams, to embrace the stories that give life depth. The visionary, then, is not only a seer but also a storyteller. They carry the myths of the past into the present, giving shape to truths that cannot be captured by logic alone. Their danger is also their gift. They remind us that beneath the surface of ordinary life flows a river of timeless meaning. Part 7. Reconciling with the unseen forces of life. The final danger, and perhaps the deepest, is reconciling with the unseen forces that guide existence. Jung was convinced that the unconscious is not merely a personal storehouse of memories, but also a collective dimension, a realm that connects every human being to something larger than themselves. Some might call it the soul, others the divine, others still the mystery of life itself. To see what others don't often means glimpsing these forces, sensing that life is not random but woven with hidden patterns. But such vision can be overwhelming. It may produce awe but also fear. To stand at the edge of the unknown is to recognize one's smallness, to feel the limits of human control. Here the danger is twofold. One might deny the unseen, retreating into skepticism and materialism, insisting that only what can be measured is real. Or one might be swallowed by it, losing oneself in visions, fantasies, or mystical inflation. Jung warned that both extremes are dangerous. True wisdom lies in balance, in acknowledging the unseen without being consumed by it. For Jung, the goal was not to conquer the unconscious, but to dialogue with it. Through dreams, active imagination, and symbols, he sought a living relationship with the forces that shape us. He believed that each person must find their own reconciliation, their own way of honoring the mystery without losing their footing in the world. Thus, the seventh danger of seeing what others don't is also the final invitation. To accept that life is larger than reason, that the unconscious holds both darkness and light, and that our task is not to master it but to live in conscious relationship with it. Ending. And so we arrive at the conclusion of our journey. The dangers of seeing what others don't, as Carl Jung reminds us, are many. The loneliness of vision, the pain of misunderstanding, the eruption of the collective shadow, the temptation of arrogance, the demanding path of individuation, the burden of carrying symbols, and the overwhelming presence of unseen forces. To see differently is not easy. It may cost one comfort, belonging, and even safety. Yet it is also the path of transformation. For those who dare to see what others don't are not merely outsiders. They are pioneers of consciousness. They carry the seeds of new myths, new visions, new ways of being that humanity desperately needs. Carl Jung's life and work remind us that vision is both peril and promise. The very dangers that isolate us may also shape us, forging us into truer, deeper, more complete human beings. So the next time you feel the weight of seeing what others overlook, whether in yourself, in your relationships, or in the world, remember that you are not alone. You are walking a path that many visionaries before you have walked. And though the journey is perilous, it is also profoundly meaningful. This is the danger and the gift of seeing what others don't.